PIP, if you look on line 26, and I'm not sure if this is intended or not, we go back to what apparently might be under 3.30, education and incentive pay rather than PIPs or pay performance.
As I was previously described, we were just identifying the programs, and in fire it says education and incentive pay. That's the heading, that's the title of it. So we're going to get rid of the performance incentive. As to an education incentive, that's going to be at the bargaining table as to whether that comes into it.
Well, then can this be changed or something so that we don't code out that we've just now eliminated their education?
Certainly, we could probably get rid of that example.
Sure.
But if we get rid of the performance pay, it's the
No.
education and performance that disappears.
Sure.
We've got to negotiate that other aspect of it.
Then on the ERB, I can't remember if that's on page that is.
You're on page 9 at the
No.
bottom.
Okay, very good. There's the discussion of, and it's fully appreciating and wanting to follow the practice and what's in the charter on the mayor's appointments, confirmed by the assembly. Something that, and this, again, this is something I'm toying with the idea of perhaps it comes in an amendment as we get closer to that point. I'm hopeful that we can use this and it gives us more time. Would there be a preclusion from the mayor appointing a person, the person with the labor background, again, from a pool of applicants, the mayor apparently appoints that person for confirmation. And then the two of those people then pick from a pool of the general public that then is subject to the appointment by the mayor and confirmed by the assembly. And I'm not sure if that's, you made a distinction on law, Mr. Wheeler, and I just wanted to make sure, would there be a preclusion from putting that in language in here? Or that's the
because
intent?
then you really haven't given the mayor any choice. You've given him a choice of one.
No, they would submit a list of 3 to 5 names for the mayor to pick. That those two would then pick from the applicant pool of the general public.
Yeah, I have to look at that. I'm not sure of that.
That's a question I just need to, and that's it for now, Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Holman. Mr. Flynn?
Just want to clarify here, and I'm pretty sure I know the answer, but I'll ask. The 4-pack, 3-pack discussion. Under the current agreement, I think it's 10 rigs have to be staffed with 4 people at any given time, 4 firefighters at any given time in the city. A couple of times in the past years' budget negotiations, some members of this body and some administration folks have said, hey, all we have to do is go from 4 to, give us the flexibility to go from 4 to 3, and we can solve our revenue issues. I think I'm hearing you say is that can't be imposed, that would have to be bargained if the agreement retains that 10 rig with 4 people on each provision in the next agreement.
That's correct, as a contract provision. And I want to qualify, I have not read that provision of the contract anytime recently, so I don't know if there is some more wiggle room. I don't think there is. I have not been part of that debate, so.
I'm sure if there were, it would have been found by now. The other question, would it be possible for you to provide a list of the folks who worked in developing the original version of this ordinance?
I think it would, I'm not sure, quite frankly. There's been a lot of input from various sources. As far as the actual drafting, it's been done in-house with advice from Mr. Holmes.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I just like an idea of which person, who within the city was giving input into this would be useful.
I would just tell you verbally that the city manager, the CFO, the mayor, the senior policy advisor, the chief of staff, the municipal attorney, the assistant municipal attorney, the employee relations director, that's pretty much the team.
Thank you. So none of the department heads, for example?
No, but they manage all the department heads, and this bubbled up because after 3.5 years of listening to department heads and their challenges in trying to manage different personnel under different contracts, that was the genesis of it. It actually came from 3.5 years of listening to department heads.
Understood. Thank you.
Mr. Trini.
Mr. Chairman, I just got a message that we've got a meeting on Monday sent out by the clerk. Would you allow testimony on 37S also? Because you're very specific, you said on 37. I want to let the public know if they got an S version, they can also comment on that.
Absolutely.
I wanted to have you clear up. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay.
Associate first.
Ms. Sosiander.
I'm sorry, one last one. So it appears that we're going to need to do some work in 3.30 conjointly. Is that your intent?
That's the next step.
But not, you haven't got anything prepared yet? Right?
It would be an awful lot of work to do, and if this doesn't move forward, then you've done a lot of work for you.
Well, it would just help clarity a little bit here, particularly in this whole issue of the leave and the scheduling bit. So I keep being hung up on this scheduling and overtime because it appears that there's recognition that seniority in terms of scheduling and overtime isn't necessarily problematic, at least it's recognized today. But I just one more time want to underline, I read this as prohibiting that for future contracts. And you're saying yes or no?
It is not prohibiting it, but it is tipping the scale in favor of management when there is any vagueness in the contract.
I'm sorry to keep hammering this. It really isn't clear to me. It really isn't. I don't know what that means. Will we look at 3.30 for clarification of what that means? I can't envision the world you're describing.
No, and I think for strictly for scheduling, especially overtime, and I'll defer from this, I don't see 3.30. That's still ultimately going to be handled within the departments, within the CBA, within the management staff. There's going to be procedures. Again, seniority is not a word used in here. We have
But
strengthened the language.
scheduling and overtime are specifically given as management rights, and they're not currently now.
We are
So-
strengthening that language. Now, to the extent we bargain it away, clearly bargain it away, we're going to lose it.
Okay.
But
Management
We're trying to
will set the
strengthen
schedules. That's the bottom line.
Thank you.
That's what managers do.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Hunter?
Well, as it relates to the arbitration and picking, that the assembly then comes to, I guess, the choice of, or the description, and I got lost a little on how that works, but is there anything under the mayoral veto power, under the charter, that would preclude any of our titles to have an exclusion, for instance? I can suppose a world where, hopeful that there's a world where we'll all sit down in good faith, negotiate bargaining agreements, and then it gets presented to the assembly and we approve it or we do not, and it goes back to the 3.70. But it just screams to me that why would, if all the power is usually gets tipped more in favor of management, why wouldn't the unions then come in with as high best offer as they can, management come in with the lowest best offer they can, and let an arbitrator basically look and say, well, I don't have a choice, I got to pick one or the other. And then we get it back into our arena, and let's just say it's the negotiated union's highest best offer at the top of the moon, or the sun, and we approve it, and the mayor just vetoes it, which then reverts back to the last best offer, which was the low ball that goes in by management.
Well, remember, it took you 8 votes to approve it. So when the mayor vetoes, he already knows he's got to get 1 vote to change their mind. So there's the possibility that he may not veto, or if he does veto, he's immediately overridden. So it's not a foregone conclusion that the outcome is municipality imposed decide best.
I get that, but I think we're getting to that overreach again. We didn't just tip, we just pegged it to the max, where simply, and no offense to, again, this current administration, it could be another mayor, it could be, we've now essentially taken away the good faith and fair bargaining of collective bargaining. I see the end result as we've just eliminated all the steps of trying to sit down and even talk about reason. We're just
I don't think so.
throwing it out.
I mean, one of the reasons that a lot of people really like baseball arbitration is because, based on their experience, it forces both sides to be more reasonable, come closer to reaching an agreement than in other forms of arbitration. And both sides suffer one way or another if they don't reach a good contract. And the assembly has a lot of power at its disposal to provide guidance at the front end and funding at the back end. So I don't think it's a I don't think the answer is a foregone conclusion. like you
Well,
described.
I guess the other thing about baseball, from my understanding, is they've had the ability to, the owners to lock out the players and the players to strike. So there's that, and then my understanding is it just can continue on, and I guess we've got time limits put in here, but I go back to this here, I think we really need to take a better look at this.
Hold on for a second. At the very beginning of your question, you started talking about the charter and the code, and I wasn't sure what
Yes,
your question
my
was.
question is there, when it gets to that point of impasse, and either, preferably, I would think that we give the arbitrator a chance to say, this is too high and this is too low, we can come back in with this. And maybe it only applies to certain things like wages and hours and working conditions, the three things that we negotiate in those areas. Then we can at least look at something that we think might be reasonable from the assembly level. Again, looking at the reason word. Then could we then say, if it gets to this point, if we haven't reached it in good faith, we got a high ball, we got a low ball, and now the assembly has to look at it. Once the assembly has decided that under those conditions, that be final and not be subject to appeal? Or is that guaranteed in the charter and there's nothing we can do in these?
I think the answer is the latter, that you can't, by code, diminish the mayor's veto power.
Well, the only reason I say it is because you've got now, where it wasn't before, you've got now an affirmative within 21 days.
Well, the reason I put that in there was not because I'm giving the mayor a new power, I'm just describing what that power is. The point, as I mentioned earlier, in doing that was to make sure it was clear in terms of timeline,